The 1960s was considered one of the most revolutionary eras of film, influencing what we come to know of cinema today. Filmmakers was inspired by youth audiences and current events, leading to one of the most creative eras in cinematic history. It is an art film movement that emerged in the late 1950s. The movement was characterized by its rejection of traditional filmmaking conventions in favor of experimentation. New wave filmmakers explored new approaches to editing, visual style, and narrative, as well as engagement with the social and political disruptions of the era. Often making use of irony or exploring existential themes, the French New Wave is often considered one of the most influential movements in the history of cinema. The French cinema consists of the film industry and its film productions, whether made within the nation of France or by French film production companies abroad. It is the oldest and largest precursor of national cinema in Europe. The term was used by a group of French film critics and cinephiles associated with the magazines Cahiers du Cinéma in the late 1950s and 1960s. These critics rejected the traditional quality of mainstream French cinema. One of the most iconic French directors that heavily influenced the French New Wave is Agnes Varda. She was born May 31st, 1928 and died March 29th, 2019. She is a Belgian-French film director, screenwriter, photographer, and artist. Her pioneering work was central to the development of the widely influential French New Wave film movement of the 1950s and 1960s. Her films focused on achieving documentary realism, addressing women's issues, and other social commentary with a distinctive experimental style. Varda was in an era when the limitation of sound technology made it easier and more common to film indoors, with constructed sets and painted backdrops of landscapes rather than outdoors on location. Her use of non-professional actors was also unconventional for the 1950s French cinema. Varda's feature film debut was La Pointe Courte in 1955, followed by Cleo from 5 to 7 in 1962, one of her best narrative films. The film features never-been-done methods of expressions, such as long tracking shots, like the famous traffic jam sequence in Godard's 1967 film Weekend. These films also features existential themes, often stressing the individual and the acceptance of the absurdity of human experience. Filled with irony and sarcasm, the film also tend to reference other films. Many of the French New Wave films were produced on tight budgets, often shot in a friend's apartment or yard, using the director friends as the cast and crew. Directors were also forced to improvise with equipment, for example, using a shopping cart for tracking shots. The portable equipment they used needed little to no setup time. The new wave of filmmaking often presented a documentary style. The films exhibited direct sounds and film stock that required less light. Filming techniques included fragmented, discontinuous editings, and long takes. The combination of realism, subjectivity, and authorial. Agnes Varda played a role influencing the new wave. Her film La Pointe Courte in 1955 was chronologically the first produced, but did not have a commercial release until 2008. Despite that, she is still considered a left bank, a group of people that share progressive political leanings and documentary past. The themes of the new wave played around loneliness, a self-awareness of cinema, the nature of memory and the past, and the quick and sometimes violent nature of love. More often than not, characters in new wave films were ultimately alone by the end of the film. The movement aimed to give directors full creative control over their work, allowing them to eschew their preferred narrative and existential storytelling. French New Wave filmmakers changed both French cinema and the film industry at large, paving the way for modern independent auteur filmmaking. Varda proves how important she is in French cinema, showcasing how Cleo from 5 to 7, 1962, is one of her most iconic works. Cleo is a French pop star who is in distress awaiting for her results of a cancer test. She spends an agonizing 2 hours going to stores and cafes while putting attention to herself and deflecting it. At first, we see Cleo as shallow and vain. But as we dive deeper, we understand the threat of mortality is what scares her the most. For the first time, not only is her beauty the most important, but her life is what's worth more. Cleo, from 5 to 7, utilizes a lot of defining techniques from the French New Wave, such as jump cuts, a montage format, long takes, and even playing around switching from colored to black and white, and occasionally voiceover inserts. La Pointe Courte is a 1955 French drama film directed by Agnes Varda. It has been cited by many critics as a forerunner of the French New Wave, with the historian Georges Sadoul calling it truly the first film of the novel vague. The story follows the lives of Louis and Ella, depicting what marriage looks like, struggling while the world is crumbling around them that can unwind the relationship. Elle arrives on Paris train at the port of Sète, where she is met by her husband who grew up there. She wonders if their marriage is worth fighting for. As the couple wander around the fisherman's quarter, the film shows us the life of its inhabitants. The women look after their homes and their children, one of them who falls ill and dies. The men in small boats follow their ancient trade, surrounded by pollution of the lagoon where they catch jellyfish. Many events took place in that town, showing the life of individual people. As their visit come to an end, the Parisian couple walk to the railway station, having decided to continue their life together. Varda is known to be a feminist filmmaker. She often comments on the female perspective and how women can live their lives, specifically in a suppressive environment. I am fond of how she cherished the women she writes about, making them strong and capable of life. Agnes Varda's work is often connected to the French New Wave, and her early films were clear precedents for the stylistic tendencies which New Wave directors described. However, her work remains particular to her own unique perspective on the world, resisting the paradigms of movement in art and film. The themes and issues in her films focus on sexuality and age, death, and time. Her work is distinct from the French New Wave also for its crossing of genres, as she is known for her documentary and shorts as well as her feature-length dramas. Not limiting herself to borders of France, her films have been shot in a variety of locations, including United States, Cuba, and Iran. In part with the experimentation of film techniques, New Wave often took on heavy political topics, often addressing social injustice and taking on societal norms. Agnes was one of the many directors that often had these political messages, which cemented her in the zeitgeist and became an important part of cinematic history. Varda received an honorary Oscar in 2018 during the 90th Annual Awards. Throughout her 64-year career, Varda directed a total of 60 films and shorts, a majority of which she also wrote. Not only making her impact in French New Wave, she also became a staple in auteur theory. Agnes Varda played a huge part of the French New Wave, and we have her and other French directors to thank for their amazing and unique films that revolutionized our techniques, cinematography, screenwriting, and more. The art of film should always move forward, and she showed us how. Agnes touched many lives. She helped shape cinema that we now know today. Thank you for providing us joy to see your art.